everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello.
Hello, Nikki.
Hello, Pete Wright.
Are you being your authentic self this morning?
Yep.
That sounds really confident.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the conversation today. I do not know where it came from. We are going to be taking on the Imposter Syndrome. We've talked about it a little bit before, but all of a sudden I look at the rundown and there's a whole episode we're going to be talking about Imposter Syndrome. Before we do that, head over to takecontroladhd.com, get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website. You can subscribe to our mailing list. That's probably the best thing to do right there is join the mailing list. We'll send you an email every time some new stuff shows up on the website, including episodes, blog articles, everything. And of course, connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD and call us at 503-664-4ADD and get your voice and your thoughts and your questions on this very show. We want to hear from you. Okay, we also have a very special guest today to help us talk about imposter syndrome, psychologist, faculty member at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine. We have Dr. Doug Herr joining us today, all the way from Nashville. Doug.
Hi, Pete.
Good to hear from you, my friend.
When you read that, I'm like, yes, and I'm also the ultimate imposter.
You are the expert on this topic.
I've lost my amateur status.
That is right. That is right. Nikki, okay, so where did this topic come from on our rundown today? Why were you inspired to do a whole episode here?
3 reasons. First of all, it came up probably a couple of years ago when I was working with my own mentor coach, and we were talking through some things, and she said, well, let me ask you a question. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, well, do you feel like you're a fraud? And I'm like, what? What does that mean? So then we went through this whole conversation about maybe being a little insecure about what you know or don't know. And she didn't call it imposter syndrome, but it certainly sounds like it now that I know what the definition is. So that was kind of on a personal level. Then it came up again when I was talking to a client of mine, and she's a professor, and this was something that she was dealing with a lot, feeling like she was going to get found out, like her students were going to figure out that she didn't know as much as they thought she did, or just really, again, kind of feeling a little insecure about her position and why she was in that position and so forth. And then recently it came up again with one of my coaching groups. And the coaching group that I have right now is a younger clientele. They're in their 20s and 30s. And she did use the word imposter syndrome and wanted to talk about it. I was just fascinated by it. So I was like, hey, I need to research this, learn about it. And I thought I would love to get an expert on the show to talk about it.
Well, excellent.
Yeah, it's affected me 3 ways. And Pete, when things happen like that, you got to listen.
Yeah,
you got to pay attention.
That's the truth. Sing it, sister. Ain't that
right.
The truth? I definitely resonate with this, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk about it, because I think from the day I quit the corporate job to do this full time, it has been a constant struggle with feeling like a complete imposter. What is it that's going on in my brain that is causing me to feel so self-judged, even in the absence of other people judging me? So where would you like to start?
Well, I would be really curious to just, find out how to explain it, because I could explain it, but I'm kind of thinking that Doug would do a lot better than me. So, Doug, can you explain what imposter syndrome is?
Imposter syndrome is when somebody who really is high achieving feels like they aren't high achieving because of their skill, intelligence, and effort, but rather it's just by some kind of fluke, and they're just waiting for everyone to figure that out. With ADHD, you're absolutely susceptible to that, and I won't try and describe everyone's experience, but I know that for me, even the fact of having my attentional drift happen, pretty much all the time. So I'm constantly trying to tune in again to, what's happening right now, because I'll just have all sorts of thoughts about what's happening right now and find them fascinating for a moment, and then realize I'm not on the same page anymore. And feel like I'm having to play catch up all the time. I mean, that right there is enough that you want to hide that from people, right? I mean, you don't want everyone thinking that like listening to them isn't important to you, right? I mean, that's exactly not true, first of all. So you want to save people from having the wrong idea, to really be present to what's going on and be engaged in it all the time is a struggle for someone with ADHD. And it doesn't matter that you love it and care about it deeply. You know, there's still the tendency to just have your attention be distracted by so many things. I can't tell you, as I was like taking, the 4 minutes to prepare for this session so that I wouldn't look stupid. There had to be at least 6 different tangents that I went to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, and isn't that so much? I mean, we did a show recently, Nikki. How does this hit you? That on impulse control, and that seems like so much of kind of what we're dealing with. Like your attention drifts largely because you find it so difficult to to bring yourself back to present because there are other things that are fighting so competently for your locus of attention and awareness at that very moment. Not that you don't care about the other thing that other people are doing, but that this other thing has come up that is so important.
Right. Well, and something that Doug said that really resonated with me is when he was talking about how you kind of want to hide that. Like you don't want the other people to know, or you don't want the person that you're talking to know that your mind just drifted. And that's that's hard to get around because then you start feeling ashamed or guilty about it when it's really not in your control.
Well, and shame is really fundamental. And anyone who hasn't already indulged in Brene Brown's work, please go do that. Mm-hmm. And because she really brought shame to the forefront, and in charming and hilarious ways too. So she's fantastic for someone with ADHD. She keeps getting your attention again. But shame is so powerful and so toxic because it really has to do with this thing about myself that I truly cannot change. And if I think that because I have this, you fill in the blank, but in this case, attentional drift is a good way to put it, then I'm not good enough as a person. That right there is so problematic. Shame is really important because it really guides and controls us unless we have a good handle on it. And what it does is it drives our attention away from itself in the background of our minds. And that is going to make us more ADHD than ever.
Well, so I want to talk more about that because what it sounds like you're saying is I'm in the middle of a situation where I'm already struggling to stay attuned to what's going on. And because I am not attuned to it, I'm shameful about it. And now I'm distracted by my own shame.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And the need to hide.
All those things are sort of in orbit of one another.
There are different schools of thought as to how ADHD comes about. I think that it's certainly just plain old, genetics and environment certainly could do it for some people, which is to say, whether it's, too much screen time or what you eat or just whatever is in your biology and it not matching up with the demands of going to school every day as a kid, that can look like ADHD. But the other thing that's very true is that hypervigilance, which is a symptom of trauma, can look like ADHD because you're constantly scanning for whatever's moving in the environment because you don't feel safe.
Hypervigilance, that's a new term for us. Can you talk more about that?
Well, okay, so it's being excessively concerned with whatever might be dangerous in your environment. And for human beings, that's often each other, right? And if I like you, I want to impress you, I want to really do well on your podcast or whatever it is, then, I can I even say that and I start to feel anxiety about it, right? So, right, that's so easy for that to happen. And then that can start a sense of feeling less grounded in yourself, feeling less confident. You mix that in with some attentional drift, and all of it can spiral really quickly. So anxiety and shame can be a big part of ADHD, and social anxiety. Right.
That is so. I think I'm becoming more attuned as you're talking about this to my own struggles with feeling like an imposter. It's this. You're absolutely right, and that hypervigilance is truly going on. It's the judgment radar that's constantly going out of my brain. Right.
It's huge.
And I'm feeling pings as people get closer to me, as people get closer to writing comments about the shows that we do. Like, that's always a thing that you're dealing with, because you don't want to. You've got to find a way to accept it and be vulnerable in order to be honest and operate with some integrity with yourself. But you also that comes with great fear. It's sort of primal.
It is primal. And I think that's one of the most important things about shame is it's very primal. It's not the smartest part of your brain, right? It's a very powerful part of your brain, but it's not the smartest part. And it's not necessarily accurate, right? I mean, you can be a lot more, we're usually much more critical of ourselves than others are of us.
True. Well, and isn't that at the core of imposter syndrome?
I think you just nailed it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was thinking when you said that, is that it's not accurate because it's your perception. It's not, and that's not necessarily the real perception or what other people are looking at. Yeah.
Right. When you have a perception of yourself, it's going to be rooted and grounded not only in what's happening in that moment, but in all of your own biases, right? Which have to do with your past and your memories. And I don't mean just explicit memories, but also your implicit memories, the kind of memories that happen in your body that they don't show up as memories. They show up as feelings and impulses, and sometimes as thoughts. All of that stuff happening, it really colors what we see in the background. It's sort of like it puts the color in our eye lenses. So then everything we look at in ourselves is already colored that way. And to assume that that's the same as everyone else's eyes is a big mistake, right? And a lot of other people are being self-critical too, not just people with ADHD, but for a variety of reasons. This is a big problem in our culture, is really being self-critical, which is basically beating yourself up when you most need love and support, right? It's going to that judgment thing in ourselves before anyone else has a chance to do it to us.
And in the case of ADHD, it can happen both about the ADHD, and that's why this is sort of magnified, because it's not just what all humans generally deal with at some time or another, feeling like they're being judged for their behavior or their performance in some way. But in this case, it's magnified by the fact that they're being judged about the spectrum on which they live.
To emphasize that even further, Pete, it's also true that the nature of the ADHD mentation, the nature of mind, is more given, I think, to unfounded judgments against yourself, just because it's ADHD. I don't have any studies on that, but I don't know that it's been studied, but I'm really curious about it, even as we're talking about it, because the neurology of ADHD, I think, is going to be that you're more lost in your neocortex. This isn't just a uniquely ADHD problem. It's just more so in ADHD, right? I mean, just like when you look at attentional issues, they can happen for anyone. If you're used to drinking coffee and you don't, if you don't get a good night's sleep, if you haven't eaten right, if you're not, if you don't have a good balanced life, like I think most people in our culture right now really probably don't have great balanced lives. But with ADHD, it's just emphasized even more. And I think that right there to me says, as people with ADHD, we need to be really vigilant about taking care of ourselves better. If you can't control your attention, then everything else you do is influenced in unfortunate ways.
So what does that look like? I feel like we've got a pretty good sense of the conditions that need to be ripe for us to start kind of sabotaging ourselves, right? I mean, when we are feeling these certain ways, we start to feel that the old imposter syndrome sitting on our shoulder. But what do we do to start to deal with that place? When we want to be able to relate to the world in a better way, what is it that we need to do to lure ourselves into doing it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because unfortunately psychology for a long time was, long on diagnosis and short on solutions. But like in this case, hopefully with your audience, that, if they're open to medication, they're already exploring that. And what I'd say about that is it is an exploration. I've tried a lot of medicines for ADHD and none of them really suited me. If they really helped with my attentional problems, they also gave me horrible insomnia. So I'm not saying there's a perfect solution with medication, but certainly it's an important option. For some people, it's just a lifesaver. But beyond that, that's just the beginning. It's really important that we get relational help. For example, therapy. It's really important to have someone just validate your experience. And the reason we have therapists, I think, as much as anything, it's not so much expertise as safety. In therapy, you have someone that isn't like you can admit things to them that you want to work on and not have it come back to bite you in your life, right? If you don't like them, you can fire them. But, if you start trying to get your spouse or someone at work to help you with issues that you're having, it could be used against you. So you have to be more careful with that.
There's no judgment. I mean, I think, yeah. Right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing you say is that there shouldn't be, right? A good therapist is not going to judge you. And if they do judge you, fire them, get a new therapist. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And a coach like Nikki, you're an ADHD, which I just found out, and I wrote down your name. I'm like, ADHD. Keep for later, Nikki. But also I want to emphasize meditation can help. This is the most basic kind of thing that I would share with any one of my patients or in the classes that I lead. What most people with ADHD feel about meditation is that must be for somebody else because I can't do it. And I want to emphasize that if you have ADHD, you're a perfect candidate for meditation, because meditation is not emptying your thoughts or clearing your mind or having perfect focus. On the contrary, meditation is training your focus. And so you might just pick a spot on the wall, a thumbtack or whatever is sticking in the wall near you, and stare at it. And staring isn't the right word. Look at it. So you keep your awareness on that thumbtack or whatever it is, that spot on the wall. And as you do that, two things can happen. One is your eyes can move, in which case you're no longer fixing your attention on that spot. The other thing is that your mind can move, right? And I'm going to call that staring, actually. So I'm looking at this thumbtack, but my mind has wandered off somewhere else. Now I'm just really staring at the thumbtack, and my attention is elsewhere. As soon as I realize that, I bring it back to the thumbtack. Okay? I call it just focus, wander, shift. So I try and focus on something, and if I'm paying attention, soon I'll realize that I'm no longer focused on it because my mind is wandering off. And then I shift back to that point of focus. Now, this is an experience basically of, one, training your attention, not by being good at it, but by constantly catching yourself not being good at it. And that's why if you have ADHD, meditation is a really good thing to do because it'll happen over and over and over and over again. And it's also resilience training because what you're really doing is failing constantly to pay attention, right? And what happens is you get used to failing and you get okay with it. And pretty soon, you're less self-critical simply because you get bored of it. In the beginning, you beat yourself up for not paying attention adequately, and eventually you get bored of beating yourself up. You're like, oh yeah, that again. Oh well, and you just keep doing it. So the longer you meditate, I really believe it's hard to overstate the benefits of meditation unless you're somebody who has like active suicidal thoughts or flashbacks due to trauma, things like that. Then you don't want to meditate. You just want to get support and therapy and start there. But meditation can be very helpful for your attentional capacities. And then I want to emphasize, too, that it's not just paying attention. And I picked something boring like a thumbtack. But the truth is, if I can become curious about the thumbtack. So now I'm not just using my neocortex to focus on the thumbtack. I'm also using my limbic system, the emotional motivational center of the brain. This makes the work of focusing a lot easier. If I can bring curiosity to it or wonder. It sounds crazy to be in awe of a thumbtack, but the universe is in a grain of sand, so why not? You're just bringing your emotions to whatever it is that you're trying to focus on. And the last thing I want to say about meditation is self-compassion is a really important form of meditation. And that's basically just turning non-judgmental kindness to your own experience in your own body. And Kristen Neff, N-E-F-F, is a scientist who her website is self-compassion.org. And I would commend that to anyone. There are free resources up there to learn how to meditate if you go through the drop-down menus. Another thing that's really useful these days is neurofeedback. QEEG is what it's called. There are other kinds of neurofeedback that are not as scientifically studied, but QEEG neurofeedback has got a great body of evidence behind it for ADHD.
What is? Can you describe what a QEEG?
So Q means EEG is just a classic old EEG, but QEEG. They use the same leads, in other words, to hook up to your brain, but Q means quantitative. So they actually do, mathematical pretest to determine what's happening in your brain, and then take very specific actions to address it. So I'm not saying it's a silver bullet. There isn't one, but for a lot of people, it's extremely helpful. My favorite authors, Hollowell and Ratley. Oh,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Driven to Distraction or Delivered from Distraction.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think these guys are great. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they say is, play, practice a skill, and work on mastering a skill, but start out from a place of playfulness rather than a place of pressure. And like trying to live up to your spouse's expectations is not where you want to begin. Right. You have to be able to play with it in a stress-free zone, and you can build skills that way. And they say the one rule with ADHD is find what you're good at and do it. And I mean, that's probably a good rule for anyone. But I know for years I tried to work on all my weaknesses, and it's not that that's a terrible thing, but it can be a waste of time. Living from a place of joyfulness and finding what you really are skilled at, which is also, you feel like you're an imposter because, I just really don't have any skills. Well, that's not true. It's really, we can be really unfair to ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's the other, this idea of the way you are framing meditation. I love the concept that you will get bored of beating up on yourself.
Well, and you know what I love about it, about what you just explained, is that I think this is the first time, and I haven't done a whole lot of studying with meditation other than what I do for myself, and I talk to clients about it, but this is the first time that I've ever heard anybody talk about meditation without closing their eyes.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, that's not even where you begin.
Yeah. I love that you say that, because I practiced while you were talking. I looked at I was looking at the little knob thing that pulls the drapes or the blinds up and down, whatever that thing is, the string thing. So as you were talking, I'm looking at it. And when you were talking about curiosity, I'm like, I wonder why they decided that shape. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it, and it's like, it's a nice shape. But it's really interesting when you see something and you're focusing versus having your eyes closed, because I don't know. I just love the way you explained that. That was really good.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, and Nikki, so just to take it one step further, to notice, even though you're having thoughts about that thing now, in the midst of your curiosity, you can also at some point say, okay, I'm going to, not that there's anything wrong with those thoughts or bad about them, but I'm going to, go right back to just looking at it again, because even indulging in thoughts can be our mind wandering, even when they're thoughts about what we're supposed to be focused on.
Right. Yeah.
And now I feel like I know what Nikki is doing while I'm talking on this podcast.
I'm going to focus on the little string thing.
You're going to be meditating.
I just like I like the explanation. I just think it's an easy way to start it with, like you said, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There needs to be, even in the beginning for meditation, and this is from Meng Tan's book, Search Inside Yourself. He would sit with his daughter for 2 minutes and not have any agenda. Just sit and hang out for 2 minutes. Like, that's a great place to start too. I think most fundamental of all here is that you start from a place of self-care, not self-improvement.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that.
If you're starting from this place of self-improvement, the very idea that you're starting with is an insult to who you are.
Oh, so true.
And it's just terrible. So if we start from the premise that we really are worth taking care of, this is my heart for this, it's really so important that we start from that place, not from we're a problem to be solved or, something to be fixed or trouble to be dealt with. No, that's not good enough. That's not inspiring enough. We want to start with a celebration that you're exactly what you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be all things to all people. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're just supposed to be a contributing part of a community. That means you need support from that community, and it needs who you are. More than anything else, you are the biggest gift you have to give to the world. So I don't want anyone to think, I have to improve myself. No, I have to take care of myself. I definitely have to improve, and I'm working on this all the time. I really want to improve how I take care of myself, because then I can, enjoy my life the most fully and contribute to others the most, I can beautify the world in the best ways possible.
Well, and one thing I just want to add real quick, when we were talking about this in the coaching group, we certainly got onto the subject about just being authentic and knowing what your intention is. And when you have a good intention and you're not doing anything wrong, you're not trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, you're coming from a really good place, that's always a really good reminder when you start going down that rabbit hole of imposter syndrome is, I am being authentic. I am being who I am. It's okay not to know everything. I don't have to know everything.
And this is really key too, because like I'm a, side note, which is unfortunate and very shame-based. I'm a recovering fundamentalist. So, I had this idea that I'm supposed to be perfect, and I've never met perfect, right? Not in me, not in anybody. And so the idea of really being authentic, being sincere, being who you really are as a goal would not have even occurred to me. And I feel really appreciative of the fact that, now I feel like, okay, that's my only job, is to learn how to bring exactly what I'm most passionate about into my work, so that my work is my calling, and not like I'm supposed to live up to somebody else's expectations or standards. That's not the starting place. I mean, that's an important part of life, but the starting place is, am I really being who I need to be in this world? And that's determined somewhere from within. Trying to live up to standards in school, just sitting still and listening the whole time, for someone else that might come naturally. But we get to feel like fakes from, like first grade on, because we just weren't made to sit there like that.
When we're talking about imposter syndrome, when we're talking about shame and all of these things and judgment, we've talked about meditation, we've talked about self-care, which was a huge aha moment for both Pete and I. But what else can you share with our audience that would help them get past them judging themselves so harshly?
I'm a really big fan of Kristen Neff, and she has a YouTube called Epiphany. She said one of the most important things about it is that a lot of our judgment is built into the back of our minds. And so mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment non-judgmentally. And I really like to say, instead of take non-judgmentally right out of the equation, because I'm just going to judge myself because I'm judgmental. And it turns out all humans are. It's a normal mental process to be judgmental. But as soon as we notice that we're judgmental, as soon as I notice, let me not use that as like a global label judgmental. Let's say as I'm being judgmental in this moment, when I notice that, now I'm sitting in the place of the witness rather than the judge, and I can start to unpack it. And what's really important to me about judgment is that it's a cover for pain and fear. So or it was pain and fear that I had in the past, right? So it's a normal process. It arose for natural reasons. Being judgmental is a normal process. So let yourself off the hook. Don't judge yourself for being judgmental, first of all. When we recognize what's underneath that judgment, that's going to be really powerful. That's basically the doorway to enlightenment as opposed to judgment in that moment, is to say, wait a minute, I'm using this judgment to avoid feeling something, to avoid thinking something. And by the way, you don't have to believe all your thoughts. They're not all true. They're just, who knows? They're artifacts of memory and ideas that your brain had when you were 4 or 5 years old or 15 years old. But you can do better than that now. So if you witness these things, realize your goal, again, it's not self-improvement. You don't have to try and change those judgments or the pain or fear that's underneath it. If you simply be present to it in a kind way and be curious about it. And that's the place where you become more self-supporting and really self-healing. It's a very self-healing process. If it becomes overwhelming, that's where you need more support. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. And that's where, good friends, other people who understand in a support group or a therapist are also very useful.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the question.
Okay, Pete. Now you can wrap it up.
I don't want to jump in if I'm...
You don't want to be impulsive?
I'm way too impulsive. I just get too excited. Well, you know what, Nikki? Seriously, this is...
Wait a minute.
Now it's you?
And now it's me. I want Nikki to talk about what she does.
Oh, they know what I do. They know what I do.
I don't. Are you sure? Come on.
Well, I'll tell you what. I will certainly facilitate that. But this is about you, Doug, and how you are first of all, a very old and dear friend of mine, and so I personally appreciate you being here. But I know you have offered something transformative to our listeners. So thank you for taking the time to do that with us today.
Thank you, Pete. And you're very welcome.
And you're a hell of a singer too. People don't know this, but old Doug, he can carry a tune.
I live in Nashville now, so I don't really bandy that about because.
Hey, speaking of imposter syndrome,
by professionals.
Boy, did you live in the wrong place for that?
Yeah, no kidding.
Anyway, this has been terrific. Anything else we have to talk about, Nikki? Do you have any final comments or thoughts?
No, this is great. I hope you'll come back on the show sometime.
Oh, me? I would love to.
I'm always on the show, Doug. Who else are we talking to?
Yeah.
No,
Pete, I hope you'll host next week.
Well, I'm going to go back and listen to all the old podcasts now because I'm excited about this.
Excellent. Well, maybe we can give you a few pointers. There are a couple.
268 of them.
Yeah, we've got kind of a catalog.
Okay,
anyway,
well then maybe I'll listen to about 28 seconds of each one, right?
There you go.
Representative sample.
True ADHD style.
Yeah, it's a perfect model behavior. Thank you so much again, Doug Herr, who is a psychologist and faculty member at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. Go find him there. You can hang out outside his office and bring him lunch. He would like that. And on behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.